Come on, man. Dances with wolves, Duskin Raiders, send people, whatever. We've seen it all before. They're feeding us the same thing. Can you please wait a little bit? We've seen the Black Wicked Chrysanthemum just for 2 seconds. There's more to come. The pit is completely empty. They gotta fill it up with something. Can you wait? We're just on the second episode. Guys, before I get into the review, I like to center myself in my method acting and kind of like suppose I can take a look at this show from both perspectives, the extreme positive, the extreme negative. I try to go and find the golden middle. Welcome to Star Wars Timeline. My name is Ben, and here we're going to break down Episode 3, The Streets of Tatooine. Before we jump into this discussion, quick spoiler alert. Guys, I will talk about the characters, the episode storyline, and the whole thing. You have been warned. This is a completely spoiler review, so let's get into it. Right from the beginning of the episode, I got to tell you guys, before we start carving out, talking about the story and the characters, let me just give you my overall impression. I thought this was another pretty strong episode. It's a little bit rougher on the edges, and the story progression took me where I wanted to be, but there were a couple of visual scenes in terms of music and action that I felt needed just a little bit of work. Anyway, let's get into the details. We begin the episode back to the Jabba's palace. We see the little spider crawling through the scenery. That was in the trailer. He's obviously in the Return of the Jedi. And we're inside the palace where we see Boba Fett and Fennec Shand are given this map of Tatooine and which different gangs are controlling parts of it. The droid is basically breaking it down for them. He's like the new majordome or whoever he is, like a servant. He's telling them what's going on there. And I really like how they address the visual effects on both the spider and the droid. I know it's this minor thing, but it's a combination of these kind of details that you start putting together the show and start either feeling right or wrong about it and say like, yes, it's hitting so many different notes, minute details that feel like the old school Star Wars that I feel a connection to it. Otherwise, if you just have focused on central themes but details are lost in translation, it might still be quality storytelling, but begins to feel like an entirely different show. So I'm happy to say that they're addressing it with a lot of admiration to what came before in terms of the droid and the spider. And we see this new person entering with his petition. Lothar Peel, he's coming in and he's like a moisture farmer. And he says, I want basically my problem resolved. I have these new punks, these kids who are not paying me tribute for my hard work. And I am insulted on your behalf. Since I'm supposed to pay you protection, can't you get rid of this little problem for me? I like that. I like the dialogue. I like the actor's performance. It put me back into that episode 4 moisture farming kind of like frontier feel of Tatooine. These people are fending for themselves. Some of them are obviously better off. They're getting richer. While, as we find out later on, these street urchins, these kids, they don't have any work, so they're resorting to kind of like bullying around. For the sake of this review, I'm going to call them the cyberpunk gang, and I mean, it's not a stretch. When we go and we meet those kids, right, Boba Fett, he takes Fennec Shand, he's like, come on, let's go resolve this. And they go and they confront these group of street thugs. They're basically cyberpunk kids. They basically enhance their bodies with all these cybernetics. They look kind of like cyberpunkish. They act the same way. That was a little bit different, to be honest with you guys. I didn't know how to take it at first. My first gut instinct was like, this is not very much like Star Wars. This is too different. But at the same time, I was like, no, hold on a second. This is different. This is a progression of things. This is the other side of Tatooine that we haven't seen before. Don't be too picky about it. Just roll with it. See where it takes you. This is what we haven't seen before. Maybe perhaps in comic books a little bit, like cybernetically enhanced Imperials and other bounty hunters and stuff like this. But now we see more of it in live action. It's not a far stretch. It happened before in Dark Horse era, in Marvel, early Marvel years of Star Wars, and now we see it in live action. So that was just a little bit getting used to, but it's me telling myself, like, look, you're an old school fan, you have a certain bias of what Star Wars should look and feel like. This is a little bit different. They're being experimental, they're trying new things. I guess, yeah, let's just roll with it. And it was not hard to accept that. They're kind of cool looking, all of them. I especially like the guy with like a white cybernetic eye. He was really cool. I like his little earring piece. His outfit was pretty sleek and cool. I don't know why he sort of reminded me like he's a Lando Calrissian wannabe. He still tries to look stylish and sleek, even though he's like a street thug. Same with the girl. She looked like these punk rock or something like that, or heavy metal, which I'm a lot into, you often see girls like coming into shows dressed like that with like vests and stuff like that and hair done like so. So I had a lot of heavy metal vibes from that. So the Boba Fett comes in. He's being a diplomat that he is, right? He wants to rule with justice. He resolves the whole beef with the moisture farmer. He says, like, look, take this money. You're charging too much. Cut down your prices. You're under my protection. This is my territory. You kids, you're complaining about not having work. Come, you're working with me now. He's controlling things now. He's getting, he's beating this neighborhood back into shape, and he's assuming control. From that scene, we circle back to Boba Fett's dream, and once again, we're reinforced with that Jango Fett's ship leaving Kamino, and once again, we see that little Boba Fett sitting there and watching his father leave. I didn't feel like it was a repetition or too much of the same scene, same content, because it's done in the service of the story. It's trying to reiterate and reinforce that point that Boba feels like a lost man, a man without family, without a tribe. He doesn't belong anywhere. He had to sit down with those, Kaminoans and just wait for his dad for who knows how long. Whenever Jango Fett went on mission, he just felt alone and by himself, and you could feel a lot for him. So I felt there was a very important story beat, and that visual repetition of things actually served the story. I didn't mind it at all. And then we see Boba Fett saying basically goodbye to his Tusken tribe for a little bit, because he's going back to Anchorhead to negotiate with the Pikes to say, like, look, we attacked your train, we'll let you guys go, now you're going to pay us protection money. He's trying to negotiate a price cut for them. And basically the Pikes are telling him, look, there's other parties that are trying to extort us for money. We didn't, sign up for that. It's either you or them. Take a pick. So there's more politicking happening there, and all these families vying for power. I like that part a lot. And now we get to one of the most problematic parts of this episode for me. When Boba Fett gets back and he sees the entire tribe being basically decimated, and he's burying them, he's just there. I guess he's sober and silent. He's standing there. There's no emotional connection there. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, the tribe is gone. Let's move on with the story. They spent quite a bit of time elaborating this tribe in episode 2, that here I felt more time was due to that particular scene and built up and telling us, oh man, he really feels. Maybe even if he doesn't feel anything, we should feel something, because we're the audience and we experienced their bonding in the previous episode. Here, I felt like the entire tribe was just swept under the rug. Like, what's happening here? It's the same kind of feeling that I got with some of the episodes in The Mandalorian and the entire Rogue One show, where what you see on screen makes sense. It is kind of narrative, and it is pushing the story forward, but emotionally there is no connection with that. The scene is just basically there for setup to telling you, like, yes, this is where the plot goes next. The tribe is killed. That's why Boba is on his own. That's why he's gonna go back, and events will transpire from that point forward. I didn't feel any connection there, and I felt it was wrong. Whether it was intentional or not, I don't know. You guys drop a comment in this video section below. Let me know how you felt about it. I'm really curious what you guys thought, so we could just compare notes. We're back to real life, and Boba Fett's dreams are rudely interrupted, and no other than Black Chrysanthemum just jumps Boba Fett right in his back to tank. I love that part. I knew we're gonna see more of him. Come on, like, they wouldn't just tease him for no reason in episode 2 and just leave it at that. He's coming back there. He's hired by the twins once again. He's pulling Boba Fett literally by his throat, and this action scene is happening there. I enjoyed how rough and unrefined it felt, because the action itself was very clear to follow on screen, but it wasn't like super choreographed with like crazy cool anime poses and action sequences, or like a corridor scene in Daredevil. It wasn't very staged. It felt like two sluggers, and obviously we know that Black Chrysanthemum is a former gladiator, and Boba Fett is basically resorting to his mitts. So I really liked it a lot. And of course, I enjoyed how they bring the kids, the cyberpunk kids, back into the scene, because Boba Fett brought them in, and now they're here to be like his little protection crew. So they come in. I really enjoyed how all of them, they weren't able quite to stop Black Chrysanthemum, but they were able to deter him just a little bit. So they're not completely useless. There is potential there. It will be cool to see how Boba Fett harnesses their abilities later on in the future episodes. So that was one of my favorite parts of this episode. I felt that's where the strength is. And of course, we see the twins arrive the next morning. with their apology. This is so much like the Hutts in the Star Wars Legends and the comic books and Star Wars canon, where like they appear to be sniveling. It's like, oh, we're sorry, we didn't mean to do that, we admit our fault. But you know, they're very cunning and they're very intelligent, and they know how to, you know, politics revolve around it, whether it's now Nalhata or Tatooine. They know what they're doing with their words. So I really enjoyed them. And what they bring as tribute is awesome. Not only we get a calf Rancor, we freaking get Johnny Trejo in there. I love him, man. I love this actor. I loved him from Dusk Till Dawn, and from those days forward, everything that he is in, whether it's Breaking Bad or something else he's doing, the most minute little inconsequential little role that he has, it's always memorable. It's his face, it's his persona, it's his stage presence, which I believe Johnny Trejo definitely has, and I really enjoyed him here. Apologies. I'm getting too excited just talking about him. And I love that his role was a little bit extended later in the pit, where he explains to Boba Fett what rancors are. And once again, this was my favorite part about this episode. Not necessarily because it was like super strong narrative choice or something like that, but a bit of nostalgia and Easter eggs blew me away. Johnny Trejo starts talking about this rancor, and he says, look, people underestimate them, and they only see one side of these creatures, that there's these monsters that belong in the pits. And that's what we saw in the Return of the Jedi. But he starts explaining that these are very highly intelligent beings. And I'm like, take me there. Come on, start talking about it. Please develop more. And he drops the bomb. He's like, the witches of Dathomir have used these rancors as mounts. And guys, those of you who grew up with the Star Wars, the Clone Wars, you may not recognize that. Perhaps if you played games like the Force Unleashed from the Legends days, and if you read earlier Legends books, primarily the Courtship of Princess Leia, where the Dathomir witches first appear riding these rancors. I love that. I know it's Dave Filoni tapping into the rich history of Star Wars lore, and he's like, I'm gonna pull that version of Dathomir, not what you saw in the Clone Wars. I'll drop up a couple of pictures. You guys could take a look at this. But he's pulling from the old school Dathomir, which I personally enjoyed a lot more than George Lucas's version in the Clone Wars. In Clone Wars, it's kind of cool. I mean, Mother Talzin and Asajj Ventress's past, and later on in the Jedi Fallen Order, they made Dathomir into its own interesting entity. But to me, it wasn't nearly as diverse or exotic or interesting in terms of lore and storyline as it was in Legends. And here they're tapping into that side. To me, that was pure gold. Again, this is not part of the episode, which is a completely, turns the show up on its head and makes it like extravagant storytelling. It's just a small Easter egg that works for a diehard fan like myself. I really liked it a lot. And once again, as I mentioned, Boba Fett starts, petting the creature, and he's like, hey, do you think I will, team up with this? And Johnny Trejo is like, don't worry, I will teach you. I will be disappointed if by the end of this first season, Boba Fett doesn't ride into town on this rancor. Because this would be like the most baller, gangster, awesome thing ever. He's got to ride this rancor because, once again, we see a little bit of setup here. And I enjoy that Johnny Trejo is there. I hope he becomes permanent. I hope fans take to him and he becomes a mainstay of the show because such a wonderful actor. All little small cameos that he does are awesome. So that was, to me, was the episode highlight. Now, let's get to the last part of this episode. Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, they're back to seeing the mayor because the twins told them that they were lied to. They're leaving to Nar Shaddaa, and basically the Ithorian mayor set them all up because he promised this Jabba Hutt's territory to a different gang. And it's like, Hutts are saying, we don't want anything to do with this. We have more than enough problems to solve on Nalhata. We're leaving, right? Again, didn't like those little majordomos, the little Twi'lek and little clerks standing there. Boba Fett this time goes in, Fennec Shand breaks the door, they go in. And what happens after this is my biggest problem with the show overall so far. That chase, right? Obviously, it's something that we've seen before in animation. One of the first, if not actually the first episode of Star Wars Rebel animated show has a similar scene on Lothal, where Ezra Bridger and Kanan Jarrus and all of them have that little chase throughout like narrow streets of Lothal, which kind of looks a lot like Tatooine. And of course, they steal some merchandise from Imperials, and they have toolbox and everything. So it's a very similar scene. So what's the problem here for me personally? Here's the thing. It looks right. All the swoop car that the Twi'lek is riding, the bikes that the gang has, the cyberpunk kids, they all look legit, visually stunning. Like you freeze a frame and look at it, it's like, whoa, this looks really highly produced, highly budgeted for a show like this. But things start falling apart literally when things are moving. First of all, I don't know what's the problem here where they tried to basically master this footage in 24 frames to kind of like harken back to old school cinema, how films were shot before. It feels very jittery. When the swoop car moves, when the bikes are moving, it's very, very jittery. And right away, you could tell it's an effect. If in episode 2, we see Boba Fett and the Tusken tribe ride those bikes, and it looked so impressive and so kinetic and so fast, here, it's sluggishly slow. It feels off. I don't know how the effect was done. Maybe I'll get to admire it when I see it behind the scene footage, and maybe there was actual bikes being pulled through actual physical streets. Then I'll be like, oh wow, they actually went out on this and they were trying to preserve physical sets as much as possible. I guess kind of I'll be more lenient, but my first instinct to looking at this now, it just feels wrong. It doesn't feel exciting at all. It doesn't feel kinetic. It doesn't feel fast. It's just like it's your rudimentary token chase scene. I guess the coolest parts were when one of the cyber kids with a single eye, when he like sleds off the wall and he lands back. That was cool. I loved one of the younger kids, the white boy, like with like elegant hair. He slams into Ralph McQuarrie's painting of Jabba's palace. I instantly recognize it because I look at a lot of Ralph McQuarrie concept art. Oh, guys, I'll drop it on the screen. You'll get to look at it. I was like, that's Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau. Either one of them is like huge fans of Star Wars concept art. They put it in there. And of course, by the end of the chase, when the Major Domo slams into a bunch of like a stand of fruits, of course, he has mail-rune fruits from the Star Wars Rebels that Ezra Bridger was tasked to find in one of the episodes. That was a cool little Easter egg. Again, this chase scene, it's not a deal breaker. I think it doesn't interfere with the rest of the storytelling that felt strong. And I felt even the problematic part where I didn't feel anything for the Tusken tribe being just murdered in cold blood like that. I didn't feel anything for them. Those two kind of made this episode, what I called in the beginning, a little rougher at the edges. But overall, we're strong because we're getting more into the story. We're getting into what most of the YouTuber reviewers and the fans that I interact with are asking for, which is the simplified versions of Sopranos, right? The crime families vying for power kind of story deal. And it separates itself from Mandalorian quite a lot. And that's what I like about the show. So all in all, strong episode. Of course, by the end of it, we see the Pikes arrive and we see this really cool spaceport scene. Now we see how people are actually entering Tatooine. I like that. It's a small scene, but it builds the world. As a kid, I always imagined like, hey, there's got to be more than just like Luke's little adobe there and Anchorhead, Mos Eisley, where he goes to Obi-Wan Kenobi. How do people arrive? There has to be like a spaceport, transportation. How do average people look like on Tatooine? And we see a little bit of that. And of course, the cyberpunk kid with a single eye patch, he's observing them. He holograms back to the palace and he says, look, they're arriving in force. We better pay attention. Obviously, that little holo recording of him is on point. Again, visually, this show is just stunning. It harkens back to Leia's little message to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So it feels right. And we basically end on this, not necessarily a cliffhanger, but foreshadowing things to come, where more Pikes are arriving. Boba Fett is up to his neck in trouble. We'll see where it continues ongoing. All in all, it's strong. If this show packs enough punch like episode 1 and 2 did, and has rough problems around the edges, I don't mind them, guys. It's a collaborative effort. It's a group of different directors, obviously with different skill sets. But I think overall, they're delivering on the show. It feels distinct enough from The Mandalorian, which was my biggest reservation. I thought it was going to be just another Mandalorian 2.0. It feels different. It's a different kind of story. It has enough good storytelling and enough great action, and yes, those Easter eggs that together comprise a good package, good deal for me. Another strong episode. I'm looking forward to the next one. Once again, I don't want to rate this just yet. I will take a look at the entire show when it finishes, and we'll take a look. Maybe I'll give it a final score. But very strong episode. I would say I was impressed with this one as much as the previous episode. Guys, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Please tell me which parts you found the most problematic and which parts you were most interested in. And those of you who are huge fans of the old school Dathomir from the Legend books, I can't wait to hear from you guys. I can't wait to discuss it. The Rancor riding thing was awesome. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate your time. Please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and we'll resume next week. Take care.